Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host Didi, and joining me today once again is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the Indycar season. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, how have you been? And not as exciting of an IndyCar finale, but a bit of controversy, but overall a great season of IndyCar this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The finale, going into the title decider, it was quite evident that Alex Palou would win the championship, barring any major incidents, right? And with Pato Award's incident and subsequent retirement, I think it made like, the race was good enough in itself, but the championship fight was over. So, yeah, it wasn't quite as
Yeah,
exciting.
definitely. Alex Palou winning the championship with Chip Ganassi Racing in only his second year in IndyCar. So, that goes to say something about his caliber. And then I think Carlos Sainz tweeted Alex Palou because they grew up karting together and racing together back in Spain. So that was kind of nice. But you have to give it to Alex Palou. What a comeback in the last three races. He was, I think, behind Pat O'Ward, not by much, maybe like 15, 20 points going into the West Coast. The West Coast, the last three races on the West Coast. But it takes a lot of grit to come back. He did have a P1 finish. He won there, and then he finished P2 and P4 subsequently after that. While O'Ward only could manage a best result of P5. He didn't have a really good last three races, which is why essentially he lost out on the championship. And then Newgarden made a comeback from I think P4 or P5 to finish P2 in the championship with that DNF from O'Ward in the last race, like you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, the championship was pretty neck to neck going to the West Coast, and then it just fell apart for Pato Award. And while McLaren have had their issues throughout the season, but the final three races were just disastrous for them.
And there was also controversy in the last race because during qualifying that I'm talking about because Adam McLaren SPN, even I thought that Pato had made it into the into the fast 12 or fast 6 whatever it was. He had gone to round 2, so yeah, the top 12 from both groups. So I thought he had made it to that, but the officials obviously judged otherwise, and Pato did not start in the top 6 or top 12 or whatever. And then he wasn't really ahead of Alex Palou, his main championship contender. And I think there was quite a deficit. I think 35-point deficit going into the last race from Alex
Yeah,
Palou. Obviously, the only way really Pat O'Ward could have won was if Alex Palou had a DNF or would have finished way back in 15th or something, and Pat O'Ward would have had to win that race. But Colton Herta was showing great pace throughout the entire weekend, especially during the West Coast. The last three races on the West Coast, and he did win two races in as the season closed. So it would have been a hard fight for Pat O'Ward to win that championship regardless. But we also have to keep in mind the fact that McLaren only have two cars in the championship, whereas a team like Chip Ganassi has four or five cars, and similarly with Penske and Andretti Autosport. So those team games definitely make it a little bit harder for someone like Pat O'Ward in the McLaren to win that championship, which is why it'll be essential for McLaren to expand their operations in IndyCar, maybe bring in a third driver next year.
yeah, absolutely. And obviously, also given the fact that these three teams, Ganassi, Andretti, and Penske are IndyCar giants, and while McLaren is a giant in motorsport, their IndyCar operation is new. Even their partnership with Arrow, SP, and all these, you know that partnership itself is new. That original team itself was not a big team as such. So yeah, it's going to be tough. But I think the gains McLaren have made this year and the way they operate, almost like a Formula One team, with a base back in walking and a race base and all these stuff. So I think they were championship. They were contending for the drivers' title this year. They will continue to contend for it hopefully next year. And yeah, bringing in that third car would definitely help them.
Yeah, definitely heartbreaking for Patricio O'Ward to lose the championship in the last three races. Even though he had a slim lead, but regardless, he was leading the championship going into the West Coast races. But let's talk about Colton Herta. I think midway through the season, Brian Herta said that that Colton is F1 material, and teams should look out for him, and maybe he's a possibility to race in F1, but not the most consistent. Not the most consistent season for Colton Herta. Definitely has a lot of raw pace, as we have seen from him. He's not afraid of chucking the car into any corner. He's all out the entire time during the race, but definitely makes, I wouldn't say a lot of mistakes, but there have been times where it seems that he was pushing the car in a Max Verstappenish fashion, if you want to put it that way, for the F1 fans, and he pushed it a little too far, a little too many times, which is why he didn't have the greatest season. Because if you remember, I think Colton Herta finished P3 in his first year. He finished P7 last year, so not the best finish then, and then P5 this year. So he's definitely really good. But I think a little more consistency and a little bit more maturity will definitely help him. And he obviously has his dad Brian Herta, with him the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, he won 3 races this year, which was the joint most with only Alex Palou, right? Everyone else had two race wins or less. So
And that goes to show how close the championship was.
exactly, and even Colton Herta had 4 DNFs while everyone else had 2 or less in the top 5. So as you said, his driving style and the subsequent uh, unfortunate incidents as such definitely cost him a shot at the title. But you know we have seen, as you compared him to Max Verstappen, so we have seen Max Verstappen mature over the 5 years, 4 5 years he has been in Formula One, and I think same will go with Colton Herta, and he's definitely a future IndyCar champion.
Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. But yeah, that was that was the new guard in a way for IndyCar, and I think this debate has been going on for the entire season. Has the guard finally changed in IndyCar? And I think while most of the people are agreeing, I'd say not just yet. Obviously, Scott Dixon finished fourth and Josef Newgarden second, which goes to show that even though we had a youngster win this season, the old guard is still there and still very competitive. Obviously, Will Power, who was a favorite going into the championship, didn't have the greatest season, but it was also down to a lot of technical difficulties that Team Penske had to face, and Team Penske in general didn't have the best season overall. But what are your thoughts on it, Vedant?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, every change of guard is a process which takes 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons. And just like in Formula One, Lewis Hamilton is the defending champion. Before that, we had Seb, and now the guard is definitely changing. Max Verstappen is probably going to win this championship or the next. We have George Russell, we have Lando Norris, and all these guys. So, and I mean, exactly, even if Max wins this season, Lewis and Seb and Alonso would be there, and they'd be there for of at least one more season. So yeah, that phase will continue. But yeah, in IndyCar, I think that championship win for a youngster is symbolic for the change of guard, and yeah, that's
Absolutely,
about it.
I would say it's way more competitive and way more difficult from a racing, from a driver's standpoint to win a championship in
In
IndyCar.
India, yeah, absolutely.
Than it would be in F1. But again, we're sitting on the outside and it's easy to comment, but we don't really know what all is going on behind the scenes. But let's talk about some of the rookies, more like veteran rookies. Obviously, we had Romain Grosjean, Scott McLaughlin, and Jimmy Johnson. Scott McLaughlin winning the Rookie of the Year with a super impressive season if you look at the stats. But honestly, I didn't follow him super closely as I did with Roman. So it's hard to comment on what his performances were like, but definitely great to see someone to jump from Aussie supercars and do so well in the first year of IndyCar.
Yeah, and I mean, not even his first year in IndyCar. I think this was his first year in open wheelers. I don't. I don't think he has done, junior open wheelers like Formula 4 or Formula Ford or all those things, Formula Renault. He was always in, Aussie V8s and Aussie supercars. So definitely a brilliant way to make that transition. And yeah, he did. I mean, yeah, everyone was following Romain Grosjean, and Roman did compete in what, three less races than Scott McLaughlin, but still Scott McLaughlin had that advantage and that consistency to
Yeah,
finish
I
ahead
know it
of
was
Grosjean.
pretty close. They were only like 20 points on either side of each other,
Yeah, 30
into the
points.
last race. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, talking about Roman Grosjean, I think he's finally, Roman's entry into IndyCar, and we've talked about this before. He had a great season, and obviously secured a drive with Andretti, which we'll talk about later. But I think F1 fans have finally realized that what IndyCar is all about, the caliber of driving that you need to be successful in IndyCar. And it's definitely drawn a lot more eyes to IndyCar. And hopefully that trend will continue as more and more F1 or, junior European drivers join IndyCar. That we'll touch upon later. But Roman had a great season, and especially I don't know if you watched the highlights of the race at Laguna Seca. He was
Yeah,
putting in moves from miles behind, and you could almost. I've never seen Roman drive like that in ages. The last time we probably saw Roman be so aggressive was back when Haas joined the Formula One grid for the very first
yeah,
time, and that year Roman was the Roman that we remember. And since or during his Lotus years maybe, but since then, it's finally great to see him, just be so confident and be the driver, the racer that we always wanted him to be in F1.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that race at Laguna Seca, I couldn't believe my eyes because Romain Grosjean at the start of the season said that the toughest transition were the brakes, right? Because Formula One brakes are too too strong as such, and IndyCar brakes were not as strong, and the most difficult thing for him to adjust was his braking. And after one entire season, during the second last race of the season, those moves at Laguna Seca, those moves at the corkscrew, I can't even pull those moves off in a video game. I mean, that was brilliant. That was a brilliant race, and I, speechless. That was absolutely mesmerizing.
Absolutely, definitely a little bit clumsy there a couple times with Scott Dixon and Jimmy Johnson, but overall he did put up a great show, and he came close to winning an IndyCar race multiple times this year. Did end up on the podium multiple times, but overall a great season. And it's great that his success came alongside Marcus Ericsson's success in the series too, because that drew even more eyes, to IndyCar, especially from F1 fans. And you have to give it to Marcus. He's a quiet guy, but he was a champion. He was a serious championship contender at one point, especially after he won his second IndyCar race this season.
Yeah, he. I mean, his both IndyCar wins came this season in Detroit and in Nashville, and he had what, a couple more podiums. He had one more podium, and
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely one of the drivers of the season for me. He was, as you said, always a quiet guy, and he fell under the radar of Roman Grosjean coming from Formula One, and the championship fight, the real championship fight up ahead. But definitely, the way, only in his third season in IndyCar, the way he you know embraced, and that consistency that he brought about was quite impressive.
Absolutely, it was definitely like a great, great driver to have in the Chip Ganassi racing team. But I just want to draw attention to the fact that I was listening to Ruth Buscombe's F1 Beyond the Grid podcast, which has been talked about a lot on social media, especially for people who love strategy and that side of things. And if you haven't listened to it, I would also encourage you to go listen to it. I don't think there has been an F1 podcast recently that has made me so excited about the sport that as that particular episode did. But I think Ruth talked about how good Marcus Ericsson was, and the fact that people did not acknowledge that when he was in F1 because of the team he was racing with, where the team was in comparison to the entire grid and things like that. And she alluded to the fact that the ability to drive the car to such in a way that okay, let me rephrase this. So Ruth said that basically you could put Marcus in any position whatsoever and he would still drive the wheels of the car, which if you tell an F1 fan, they'll laugh it off.
Yeah.
But we saw that happen in IndyCar. And then Ruth also alluded to the fact that Marcus Ericsson was one of the best midfield or back of the grid drivers because he was so good at taking blue flags and whatnot and talking about his skills regarding strategy, his tire management skills and whatnot. And I think that is something that F1 fans should look out for, or any fan in general should look out for when watching Marcus Ericsson race in IndyCar and finally being able to showcase his racing skills in motorsport.
Yeah, I think I lost you there, but I haven't listened to that podcast yet. I would do that, soon. But yeah, I think Marcus Ericsson definitely displayed why he joined Formula One, why he was picked up by Sauber in Formula One, and I think it just goes on to show that there is talent in Formula One, even in that lower rungs of the grid. There's talent in Formula 2, as we saw with Christian Lundgaard and Callum Ilott. These drivers can make it to IndyCar and can perform at a level that would match
And be competitive straight
and
away,
be competitive.
basically. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, before we jump into that, let's talk about Rinus VeeKay. Also, Rinus VeeKay had a fabulous start to the season. He was up there. He won the Indianapolis GP, where Roman Grosjean came P2. But after his injury that he suffered later on in the season, midway through the season, it was a very quiet second half of the season from Rinus VeeKay. It didn't seem like he was on pace. I'm not sure. I didn't read too much about him, but maybe he was just still recovering from his injury and still getting up to speed a little bit. Hopefully, we'll see him back at the very top of the grid next season.
Yeah, Rinus VeeKay didn't get even a top 15 finish in the second half of the season, and that injury just derailed his season, because before that he had a win and a podium, and only most finishes were top 10. So yeah, definitely a struggle for him, but yeah, again he's part of that the new guard and that young generation, so hopefully we can see him up front next season.
Yes, absolutely. And let's talk about Ilott and Lundgaard. Obviously, Lundgaard did have one weekend outing, and he impressed everyone in IndyCar. He put it up there. He qualified really well. He was in the top 6. I don't remember where he started exactly, but Callum Ilott did not have the best of the weekends. I think he had the last 3 races or something in IndyCar. Not the best outings, but he'll be coming back with Juncos Hollinger Racing for a full season in IndyCar next year, and I'm really excited about that. Callum Ilott was in F2 for a couple of years, and we I wouldn't say we followed his rise through the junior ranks, but he was always in conversation whenever I was listening to a podcast or watching YouTube, and he was always in conversation about the next F1 rookie alongside all the big names, whether that was Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, whoever we might have been talking about. So definitely a talent to look out for. It'll be a difficult season because obviously Juncos Hollinger Racing haven't been racing full time in IndyCar per se a whole lot, and it's a small operation. But hopefully they'll come through and put up some performance that both Callum Ilott and we as fans can be proud of.
Yeah, definitely. Even as you said, he didn't have the best results in the last 3 races, but the fact that he secured that drive for next season just goes to show that he was there. He did impress people, and I think finally with his racing future secured, he can finally commit to the series and get better, because he had an off season this year. He was racing in sports cars in the GT Endurance Cup, but other than that he was just a Ferrari reserve driver. So yeah, if he'll get a proper complete season in a top series next season, so definitely great for him.
Yep, and there have been rumors that Toyota is closer to joining IndyCar come the 2023 season, and there are talks going about that. But the comments from Toyota don't show any such intent. They didn't lead on to something like that. They just and Toyota is pretty involved in motor racing in the North America. You know, they compete in NHRA, NASCAR, and every other series, but they've been out of IndyCar, and all Toyota had to say was they're simply keeping a finger on the on the pulse of motorsport in the US by having talks with IndyCar and maintaining relationships. But let's talk a little more about the overall IndyCar and F1 debate that we've been having and how F1 drivers have been moving to IndyCar. And the question that I want to ask you, Vedant, is should racing drivers move to IndyCar instead of F1 to really showcase their talent and really go racing in a way, almost you could say. And then should W Series also partner with IndyCar, for example, with a company like Pareto Autosport, who are working towards getting women into those into the top level of motorsport in the US, because we saw Pareto Autosport do really good. They were obviously supported by Team Penske, and Simona De Silvestro was exceptional during the Indy 500, and that is not me saying that, or the results may not show that, but everyone from the Penske team, came out and said that what Simona De Silvestro did on track, especially during qualifying, was something that none of the other drivers in the Penske team could have done at that point of time, and the data shows that. So if our listeners haven't heard about that or read about that, I would go encourage you to go dig out some articles about that. So what are your views on the European circuit basically pushing to join IndyCar, or investing in IndyCar instead of trying to get into Formula One per se?
I think the Pareto Autosport and W Series thing is, in my opinion, a no-brainer, because obviously the women team and all women team and all women series, and I think if they team up, they'll just multiply their reach and their fans and all that stuff, their funding. But
I mean, yeah, in addition to that, like we've seen F2 and F3 are reverting back to their old calendar, and they'll feature together during the F1 races next season, which leaves W Series by itself on other weekends. So could W Series have a partnership with NTT IndyCar and Team Penske and feature in some of the IndyCar races as a support series instead of just supporting F1, and race more in the US to grow that relationship with IndyCar, because we also saw Tatiana Calderon test for an IndyCar team. I don't remember which one earlier in the year, which was alluding to a full-time seat maybe for her in IndyCar with Pareto Autosport or another team in 2022.
yeah, I mean, anyway that happens, I don't think W Series will go to the US. I think they'll stick to the European circuit most likely, because that's what the structure is. They come under the FIA regulations, and they do want to, like, the aim is to get drivers into Formula One, right? So I think the structure would remain that, but definitely a partnership with Pareto Autosport specifically would be helpful for both parties. Regarding drivers moving to IndyCar, I mean, see, Alex Palou was a future Formula One hopeful. He I think he raced in Formula 2 even for 2 rounds, and he raced in Japan before moving to the US. We have Marcus Ericsson, we have you know Takuma Sato, obviously raced in Formula 1. We have Romain Grosjean, Sebastian Bourdais. I think the number of drivers who have moved from Formula 1 or the Formula 1 circuit per se to IndyCar is big enough to not big enough to ignore that. I mean, big enough to
Not acknowledge that.
not acknowledge that, exactly. Sorry. And I think with, I mean, obviously the thing about the budgets and the money and all these things come into play. I think IndyCar is a brilliant series. It's competitive, and as we have seen, even in a midfield team, even in a lower ranked team per se, you can truly fight if you have that talent.
I mean, Yeah, talking about budget, IndyCar did announce a new junior F4 like series. I think they're calling it the USF Junior or something like that. I'm not sure. There was an article on Formula Scout. It'll be the eighth F4 series in the US, and the reason IndyCar are doing that is because they're saying the USF 2000 series is seeing a lot more competition than they initially thought they would. So, which is why there's a need for a IndyCar Junior series, particularly. In the F4 sector. So we'll be seeing that, and it comes with the same benefits like any other junior IndyCar series, where if you do well, if you win, you get a sponsored drive into the next series above. And I think that is something that the European circuit really needs to either emulate or somehow tap into that ideology to help drivers move up the ranks. Because I think if IndyCar continue to do that, we might see more and more talent move to IndyCar over the next few years. Because someone like a US, like an American hopeful driver for F1 like Logan Sargent is still stuck in F3, and he's not been he's not been able to move up because of all these budget cuts and responsibilities and other things that he has to manage, sponsorship and all, in that particular circuit. Whereas had he been in the IndyCar series, he might, and had he done that well, he might have had a better opportunity to move into IndyCar much sooner. But he's still grinding it out in the European circuit.
Yeah, I mean, the way Logan Sargent has been performing in Formula 3, I think he would have been a title contender in Indy Lights this season probably, and get a IndyCar seat in the next 2 seasons or something like that. But yeah, definitely, I think, I mean, the potential for European drivers to move to USA for the IndyCar and IndyCar Junior Series is so much greater than American drivers coming into Formula One right now. And I mean, we know that Formula One wants American drivers, Formula One wants American audience and all that stuff. But as you said, the structure and the benefits of the Junior Series can be emulated from Indy Lights and all these places. The US Junior structure, yeah.
That's really it from my side, and I'm interested in what rule changes IndyCar might bring about. After having a few controversial moments this season, we saw a huge debate when Romain Grosjean got stuck behind Takuma Sato, which basically lost him his first IndyCar win at the Indianapolis GP earlier in the year. And IndyCar came out and said they'll reevaluate their blue flags rules and things like that. And there's been other controversial moments like in the last race in Long Beach, where the qualifying results or the way they went about deciding who qualified in the for round 2 of Fast 6 was kind of controversial. So that'll be interesting, but I don't know what IndyCar will be doing. We've seen all these motorsport series say a lot of things, but change is difficult to bring about, and it's usually pretty slow. So we'll see what happens. But that's all from my side. Without any closing thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, this was the first season for me following IndyCar properly, and I just learned that IndyCar gives points out to every driver till 33rd or something like that. And I mean,
yes,
there are 33 drivers in the Indy 500, so they give points out to 33 drivers.
Yeah.
But in the regular season, there are only 25 or some drivers.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that was funny for me to learn that, and I don't know, I can't accept it because of the way I have seen motorsports go about in the European circuit. So I don't know if they should change that.
Anywhere else in the world. I don't know another series which gives out points to all the drivers. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot
exactly.
of sense.
I mean,
but then IndyCar is that way a little bit.
That rule allowed Josef Newgarden to be in title contention in the last round when he was 49 or something points away.
Yes.
Right. That's simply ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know if they should change that or something. But yeah, it was just an observation I made, and
I mean,
pretty strange.
Since they have like 25 drivers instead of 20, I guess they could switch to a MotoGP-ish, points table where where they give points to the first 15 drivers
15,
instead of all of them. But they've operated like that for a long time. It's the same thing. The IndyCar qualifying is a little bit weird, and people don't really like it. But it's the way they're operating right now. So it'll be interesting to see what they do to combat that. On that note, just before we close out, I think on the same podcast with on the Beyond the Grid podcast with Ruth Buscombe, I think she alluded to the fact that the F1 elimination qualifying was a strategist's dream, and she thoroughly enjoyed that. Whereas it was totally, no one liked it except the fans didn't like it, the teams didn't like it, the drivers didn't like it. But she, as a strategist, enjoyed it a lot. So there are different perspectives. We'll see what happens. You got to remember that fans. I mean, obviously, fans are the ones supporting the sport, but they're not the only stakeholders making it happen.
Yeah,
so there's a
definitely.
lot of people involved. But yeah, thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again. It was great talking IndyCar with you, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to us.